Not For Nothin, name of the podcast. No, I mean, from like the sexuality, don't fuck little kids and animals, and I don't give a fuck what you're into.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yep.
It's hard to believe that you have to say that, but there are some sick people out there in the world. Again, sexual. I don't care what your sexuality is. I don't care what you do in your personal life. As long as you're doing it by yourself and you're not affecting anybody else or harming anybody else, I don't care what you do. You can be gay, you can be trans, you can be whatever you want except for a pedophile in my eyes. There are some exceptions to rules, but don't fuck with innocent people and people that can't defend themselves and live your own life as a decent human being. I don't care what you're into.
Yep. It's funny, you and I both, in other conversations we've had, but even in this one, we come back to, God, it's so simple. Do no harm.
Yeah.
You know, I have a patch on a hat somewhere. It says, do no harm, but take no shit.
Makes perfect sense.
And I literally think that if I were to start like an anti-bullying class for kids, an anti-bullying self-defense class, like that would literally be one of the mantras.
That's a great mantra.
Yeah. Yep. I don't care. I recently got, it's funny you bring up the trans issue. I made a post recently about trans women in women's sports, biological men in women's sports. And somebody had come back with the argument of like, well, how come we don't hear anything about, trans men in men's sports? And that's, for those that are not following, that's, biological women transitioning to a man playing against men. And my point was, as far as an individual, do whatever the fuck you want. Ride a bull, skydive, jump in front of cars. Like as a singular individual, whatever you want to do, cool. But, the reason we don't hear about trans men and it not being fair for the trans man to be competing against men is because that's an individual decision they're making for themselves. That is a biological female who is deciding that they want to compete against men. When you look at it the other way and you have trans women in women's sports, biological male in women's sports, the women within that sport don't get to make that individual choice.
Right.
So, and when you start comparing it, no matter how you look at it, there's a reason women aren't in the NFL.
Correct.
There's a reason that, that we have men's sports and we have women's sports. I've done a little bit of looking in this. So during puberty, a male has about 10, and women get, young girls get a small amount of testosterone during puberty, right? It's 10 times the amount.
Yeah.
Like it's not even close. And that made me think about the fact that when we have young girls that are transitioning at about that age, a lot of them report very early with hormone therapy that they feel great. Yeah, of course you do.
Yeah.
Testosterone, a hell of a drug.
Yep.
Yep,
absolutely. Well, go ahead.
No, please.
Well, and to that point, as a dad that had daughters that went through competitive sports and they busted their ass to further themselves amongst their peers. I would have been upset had a biological male come in and try to dominate the sport, because ultimately what they're doing is they are harming young women by doing so in multiple ways. You're killing their drive, because if you come in and you dominate a sport because you are a biological male, especially at a young age, these girls they're going to lose their drive to compete in sports, because they know that they can't compete if there's somebody bigger, stronger, and faster in everything that they try to do. I think it's an unfair advantage, biologically an unfair advantage, and it's not fair to these young girls or women that have trained their whole life to be the best that they can be and compete with the best women in the world, only to have a biological male come in and take that away from them. And I hate to say it this way, but it seems to me, I guess I don't hate to say it, but it seems to me that most of these biological males that come into women's sports, they have considerable failures in the men's aspect of the sport. They've never placed in enough of a higher bracket that when they move over to the women's side, they absolutely dominate. That to me, it sort of seems, I don't even know how to say it, willful neglect, bad term, but it seems that they are willfully causing harm to somebody else. That's where it goes back to cause no harm. For me, I think that you know exactly what you're doing. You know exactly what you're doing, and you're doing it for very selfish and personal reasons. That's not right in my eyes. Again, I don't care what you do with your life as long as you are not affecting somebody else's.
Yep. And it's funny. So one of the things, boy, we can tie a few things together. So one of the things, excuse me, that we've seen with the rise of social media and the phone is a massive increase in, if not diagnosable, narcissism, a massive rise in narcissistic behavior.
Oh, yes.
And you'll see quite a bit of this in anything that garners you social attention or cue points, right? And when we're talking about the trans issue, particularly as it relates to teenage girls, first off, almost without exception, those diagnosed with gender dysphoria, right, have multiple psychological comorbidities. This is rarely, if ever, the only issue.
Right.
Right. And this kind of, I'm bringing this up because, yeah, part of what you're dealing with when you've got the guy who was, and this is not an embellishment, this is, you know, you can, the guy that was 400th.
Yeah.
In college swimming, for example, and then all of a sudden transitions to female and is number one, is breaking records like it's their job. Well, the accolades that come with that, the rewards that come with that, the recognition that comes with that, this is the narcissism.
Yes.
That is part of it. And yeah.
It's damaging. It's damaging to the sport. It's damaging to the participants of the sport. And you'll find people that will defend that. Again, they're on their soapbox. They're, hey, look at me. I'm virtue signaling. I'm more virtuous than you are. You know, and I would think, and I know we've touched on it in the past, you know, with feminism, and you know, I mean, I'm a firm believer that, you know, a woman is in every aspect probably greater than any man. But I can't believe that more women aren't upset about that type of thing happening in women's sports. And I know there are women out there that are upset about it and they're vocal about it, but a lot of people don't say anything. It seems that, again, with the internet, it seems that you only get the people that are saying, hey, look at me. You know, I'm more virtuous than you. This is okay. Well, it shouldn't be okay. It shouldn't be okay, but it's accepted. And I think that goes back to, I mean, really all this ties together. I mean, even in our generation, you know, there was more face-to-face interaction, you know, more talking. I grew up with some of the best friends and still call them family of people that are gay or homosexual, you know, or I've never once looked at somebody and said, I can't be a friend to somebody that lives a certain lifestyle. But I can certainly say in the same breath that a biological male should not compete with biological females in most every aspect of women's sports. It's not fair. And it's not fair to the women, first off. It sort of goes back to, you know, Caitlyn Jenner winning Woman of the Year. I mean, that's a slap in the face to women. That is an absolute slap in the face to women. And I can't believe that it's accepted, and I can't believe that any self-pronounced or self-described feminist would ever agree to something like that. Yet they do.
Yeah, it speaks to the efficiency and the success of the hijacking of language. And I will say that some of the more extreme individuals on that particular side of the argument have done a fantastic job. They have taken the term woman and just umbrellaed it to incorporate so many different facets of individual, Matt Walsh's documentary. And I agree with Matt on some things. He's hyper-religious, don't agree.
Sure.
He's, too far right for me on a lot of topics,
yeah.
Right? But I did appreciate, that particular, what is a woman?
Right.
It's a biological human female. Like, it's that simple, and I don't think there should be any issue with that definition. And what has happened is that woman now incorporates anybody that feels a particular way.
Right. It's a feeling.
The melding of gender and sex has been a huge issue with this. And it kind of got to a point where, like, well, some days I feel a little more this way. And, some days I feel a little more, guess what? I sew and I bake.
Yeah.
Some days I feel a little more feminine. At no point would I consider myself to be, a woman.
Right. Right.
And I think that it's funny because we're right back to narcissism and narcissistic behavior, where people will do whatever they can to garner attention. And I see this as a huge thing in the recent trans movement. So a little bit of background, right? Throughout the history, the recorded history of being trans, the people that were afflicted with it were young boys ages 2 to 6. Almost without exception, out of that incredibly small group, most of them grew out of it by puberty.
Uh-huh.
Right? And now what we're dealing with is the group of people that is most afflicted by social contagions, and that is young women.
Yep.
Back when we were kids, it was, the social contagion was, it was bulimia, or it was anorexia,
right.
or it was cutting, or it was suicidal tendencies. That was a big thing.
Yep.
All of these things were ways to garner attention. And hey, I get it. Particularly in this case, I firmly believe that one of the hardest things in the world has to be being a young woman.
Oh, absolutely.
The simple fact that as men, when we reach sexual maturity, our strength increases, we're tougher, we have less to worry about.
Right.
When a young girl hits puberty and begins to develop, it's exactly the opposite.
Right.
I understand and accept completely that what comes with that is fear and uncertainty, the fear of what becoming a woman might entail, at the hands of men. And I understand that the changes that happen to a girl that signal these things may be particularly disturbing. So what we do is we take an individual, the young woman, at a time in her life that is absolutely the most uncomfortable, and we tell her that all those things she's feeling has to mean that she is not a woman.
Right.
And then we give her an avenue and a way to subvert all of this. And yeah, I ain't buying it. To that point, I couldn't imagine what it would have been like growing up as a woman, and the trials and tribulations that they go through, and the things that they have to put up from other women or men. I mean, women are vicious towards each other. Yep.
At that age, and
at every age.
More so than men are. Because it's.
You know what women don't do to a certain degree, and I'm not speaking in absolutes, but speaking in generalities, women don't bust each other's balls.
No, they don't.
And because I'm a ball buster, I've got friends who are women. Me and my wife had an issue very early on in our friendship years ago. You know, I'd bust her balls about something and she'd get really upset.
Yeah. Yep.
And like, yeah, men and women are very, very different in that. And yeah, I don't know where I was going with it, but like,
yeah, I've never had to look at one of my friends after busting his balls and go, "Look, man, I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
I'm just joking."
You're fucking crying.
You know how many times I've had to say that to my wife?
That's all I'm saying. Like, yeah, and men and women are very different. And it's interesting. I remember I was a bouncer years ago, and the fight I don't want to break up is two girls. Because two guys, most of the time, they don't want to fight.
Yeah.
But they got people surrounding them. Everybody's looking at them. All right. So they get pushed.
At least one of them's waiting for that bouncer to break it up.
Exactly.
Yep.
The second I get in there, they're, oh, thank God. You know what I mean? And they stop.
Absolutely.
For the most part, if you're going to get two girls to fight, them bitches want to fight.
Yeah.
Like, they can't wait to fight. They want to fight to the death.
And you're getting hurt getting in the middle
right.
of that.
Yes. Yep. You know.
Excuse me.
So yeah, what prompted, I recently made a post on Facebook just about the trans issue, and what I was addressing was the irresponsibility of the Democratic Party at this point to vote no on a resolution.
Yep.
That would,
protect girls and women.
The Protect Women in Sports Act, like literally. And my point simply was, a recent New York Times poll, fairly reputable, 79% of the population thinks that women should not, trans women should not compete in women's sports.
Right.
And I felt it to be incredibly partisan and disingenuous on the, Republicans in the Senate that absolutely refused to vote properly on that. Vote in the way that their constituents want them to vote. It regularly blows my mind that this is a conversation that we have to have.
Right. And I love how the media, calls them leaders. They're representatives. They're supposed to represent their constituents, and they fail to do that for several reasons. One being money. You can't tell me that a politician should go into office and serve, be a public servant for 4 years and come out a millionaire. The other one would be, and I suppose it'd probably lead back to money at some point, but the virtue signaling of, they don't want to be portrayed as on the wrong side of history, which we all know that the wrong side of history is the side of history that doesn't do its people justice. You should be more concerned with the safety and the well-being of your constituents than you should any type of popularity or party line, which is unfortunate because that's where we're stuck in a two-party system. It's always been about that, but it's rigged to the point where I don't think in my lifetime we'll ever see a third party that's successful. There's just not enough. There's not enough money in it for the backing for a third-party politician to make it anywhere.
Yeah, I agree with you. There's not really enough interest even. The majority of people that I know, they pay attention maybe for the midterms every 2 years. They kind of pay attention for the presidential election. But for your day to day, not really too much. And
I was guilty younger, and I guess I would have probably said I leaned more liberal when I was younger. And I think with experience comes some point you got to grow out of that whole mindset.
If you're 20 and you're not a liberal, you have no heart. If you're 40 and you're not a conservative, you have no brain.
Right.
And again, speaking in generalities, but I do find that quite a bit of that is true. It's interesting going back to language and how things are grouped together and then conflated as being the same thing. I firmly believe that one of the biggest disservices to the gay community is the hitching of the trans movement to their wagon. I really do. First off, I don't believe them to be the same. That one of the more frustrating things probably to have happened to the gay movement is for the trans movement to hitch their wagon to it. I don't believe they're the same at all. As a matter of fact, I find them to be quite a bit oppositional. You know, I think that, and I firmly believe, like, you're born gay, right? And the way that it's always been presented is, you know, shit, Lady Gaga made a song, you know, I was born this way.
Yeah.
And trans seems to be completely the opposite.
Right.
I was not born this way.
Right.
And I don't find them to be the same even a little bit. And I think it's unfortunate for the gay movement to continually have to defend this. You know, this isn't about a sexual orientation.
Right.
And that's kind of what the movement was about. And I understand wanting to help marginalized groups, you know, wanting to be supportive. I don't think there's any reason the gay community or anybody can't be an ally to the trans movement. You know, personally, I'd love to consider myself one. I don't care if you're trans.
Right.
You know, 6, 7, 8 years ago, if you were trans, cool, and I'll make an effort to use the proper pronouns.
Right.
You know, and I'll try and be respectful. And where the movement lost me, and I think lost most people, was you wanted to allow XY chromosomes to play sports against XX.
Right.
And then you wanted to have a discussion about transitioning children.
Yes, that is outrageous.
I can't, there's no way I'm ever going to get behind. You know what I wanted to be when I was 8 years old?
Spider-Man.
I wanted to be a fucking Tyrannosaurus Rex, right? And we can only thank the good Lord that my mom did not schedule my arm shortening surgery.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
And that is a very valid point. It's no 7-year-old kid knows what they want to be,
what they want for lunch,
what they want for lunch.
Like, they
don't want to take a nap.
Yeah.
You know, they want to argue with you about the most basic of things. I think it's child abuse to actually push that on your kid, because whether the kid is, you know, not sure of what they want to do or what they want to be, you know, encourage your child by all means. But if you're the one advocating that you should be able to do whatever you want with your child, that's selfish. That's not about the child. That's about you as a parent. And that is abuse. And it's somewhat curious that, you know, a lot of trans children have parents, you know, it's rife in Hollywood. That's a coincidence. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Right. And again, we're right back to, I mean, the title of this episode should be, you know, narcissism in culture. Yeah. Because, you know, once again, we're back to parents living vicariously, you know, through their children. And that's not okay when the dad who played football wants his son to be a football star and puts ridiculous pressure on him. Yep. And it's not okay when the parent who wants to garner social points from their peer group pushes a child in a certain direction. Like, none of that is okay. Yep, absolutely. I agree 100% on that. Yeah. And that's the unfortunate, you know, that goes back to, I can completely agree with anybody's lifestyle as long as they're not doing harm to somebody else. But you as a parent, you're doing harm to your child. You're doing irreversible harm to your child. Whether you want a transitional surgery or not, you are still, by promoting that and focusing on that, you're not giving your child an opportunity to grow in any other aspect of life, because you want this so bad. Yep. And you see these, and that's a generalization, but you see that on the news with these people all the time, these parents, that I should have the right. Well, what about your kids' rights? You know, it's disheartening. And it is out of touch, and it's, you know, back to the LGBT community, it's a contradiction. Like you said, it's a contradiction that, most of the slogan, when I was growing up for the gay community was, I was born this way.
Yep.
There's nothing I can do about it, It just seems like they're trying to ride the curtails of
an established movement.
That has went through so much shit to get to where they're at in this day and age, and that just drags them back a little bit, in my opinion, in my honest opinion. But then again, we're going back to the narcissism of it all. You want to be the first one to be the best advocate for the strangest thing out there, or the next big thing out there. It's disheartening to know that society is more worried about their how tall they stand on their soapbox for somebody else than it is actually doing something that means something to somebody else or does good for somebody else. Society, and there are a lot of good people out there. Don't get me wrong. I'm not a doom and gloom type of guy, but there is something wrong with a lot of aspects of our society. And the way people approach life in general, certain issues, social issues, and you look, I guess not to really change the subject, but to the point, you look online right now, anybody that considers themselves, an advocate for somebody, they're quick to get offended for somebody else, not really knowing what they're going through. And they will insult you. They will try and get you canceled. They will, because they don't agree with you. They want to look like the bigger person. Again, I sort of got on a tangent there, but that's sort of where we're at as a society. It's a popcorn society where, hey, look at me. Look how good I'm doing by saying this. Well, you're not really doing good. You're saying things that feel good. You're not helping anybody. You're just saying shit.
Yeah, there's a certain, it's funny, I have, again, this is a topic I care very much about, biological men in women's sports.
Absolutely.
And the most support that I have gotten on this topic has been women in combat sports particularly. And it's because that these women have had the experience of, a lot of them, of training for a very long time and being incredibly proficient in a particular art, and then getting stomped out in practice, not, literally, but getting easily handled by, a 16-year-old boy, or, the high school wrestler that came in and has never really done this before, if we're talking jiu-jitsu.
Right.
And, again, if you're looking for somebody to support the separation of the biological sexes when it comes to sports, I find that women in combat sports are the ones who, maybe not publicly, but when private talks are had, are like, how is this even an issue?
Who else would better understand that?
Yes.
And it makes perfect sense to me.
Yep.
Firsthand the differences, on the mat, it transfers to on the court.
Yeah.
Or on the field.
Yep. Yep. There really isn't, trying to think of a sport, I don't want to hang myself, but why stop now?
Right.
Trying to think of a sport where it's segregated and women are better than men. Interesting. So this was years ago. Serena Williams was asked, what's it like being the best tennis player of all time? And she said, don't you mean being the best female tennis player of all time? And I feel like that, corresponds with women in combat sports being like, whoa, I don't want to fight a guy.
Yeah.
I do think there is something to be said for measuring people's athleticism in competition against, funny, used the word earlier, against their peers.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean? We don't have 6-year-olds competing against 10-year-olds, regardless of sex.
Right.
Biological men should compete against biological men, biological women, same. And
Well, and any sport that you go into, there are age groups, like you say.
Yeah.
You know.
Yep.
And you know, it's funny trying to think of a sport, but my wife brought it up at one point. You know, just as far as, because obviously she feels the same way about biological men competing in women's sports, but you know, track and field. You know.
It ain't close.
It's not even close.
No.
And for thousands of years, well, as long as, you know, there has been some sort of, you know, Olympic event, you know, it's not go thousands of years, but you know what I mean. It's always been segregated. And it's not because the men didn't want the women competing with them. It's because it was an unfair competition, you know. And biology doesn't change from the beginning of time to now. I mean, there might be some slight adaptations, but biology and facts don't change over time.
No, and I've had several arguments offered to me on this, so I'm kind of prepared for it. I've had several people be like, well, if you have a trans woman who enters into competition with their testosterone levels below a certain point, then they should be allowed to compete. And my response to that is absolutely not. And here's why. They already benefited from developing with testosterone.
Absolutely.
And we're talking, you know, fast twitch muscle, we're talking bone density, you know, we're talking lung capacity, we're talking, you know, almost any physiological component that would relate to physical competition sports, you know.
Yep.
And then the only other argument you could possibly make is like, well, what if this individual never received, this XY chromosome person never received the benefits? And now we're talking about puberty blockers and testosterone blockers being administered to a child, in which case I absolutely say fuck no.
Yep.
And that's not cool either. So there really isn't a scenario, and I firmly believe I'm on the right side of history with this.
Yeah, and that's not, you know, agreed. I don't see, even with how popular the opinion is on the other side of this, I don't see how it could ever possibly go down in history as we're being on the wrong side of it.
No, and that's it's funny because we were talking earlier about the differences between the gay community and the trans community. And one of the arguments that, you know, a fallacious argument, I believe, but is that, you know, well, at one point we thought, you know, being gay was something that could be corrected.
Yes,
and the gay community was treated as a mental illness. And, you know, this is where I go back to how it's not the same as far as one is born this way. It's funny, it's one of the issues I have. There's a case coming up in front of Congress shortly where they want to ban transition therapy.
Yeah.
And my issue with that is, A, it's a free speech issue. It's also an issue between, you know, doctors and their patients. And I kind of feel like that on the abortion issue. You know, I'm not pro-abortion. Who's pro-abortion?
Right.
You know,
right.
Thursday, it's get abortion. Like, no, you know. I absolutely think that Iowa has got their head up their ass with 6 weeks. Nobody knows if they're pregnant in 6 weeks.
Right.
You know, so my point about the transition therapy being something that becomes illegal, listen, I don't think it should be allowed to employ transition therapy for somebody that's gay.
Absolutely.
I don't think you should pray the gay away or, you know, that anybody who's gay has anything resembling a psychological issue or anything like that.
Yep.
However, I do not think it's the other way when it comes to trans, and that's not just my opinion. It's in the DSM-5. It's been in the DSM since the 3rd edition. You know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
So my point is, once again, we're lumping things together. And the thing we're lumping together is issues of homosexuality with issues of being trans.
Which do not correlate.
No. You know, again, you can't sell it to me that, you know, when I think transition therapy, right? When I think of, when I think conversion therapy,
Yeah.
right? For gay people, I think of a priest telling you what a bad person you are if you're a dude for wanting to suck dick. Like, that's what I think of, and that's absolutely 100% wrong. Suck that dick, bro. Like, cool.
Yeah.
When I think of conversion therapy as it relates to being trans, I do think that particularly, here's the thing, if I'm trying to talk you out of being gay, or let's say I'm affirming your gayness, what I'm not doing is irreparable damage to you with medications and surgeries.
Right.
So I do think that in the issue of trans, there's a certain benefit to sitting down with an individual and being like, hey, before we make you sterile
Right.
for the rest of your life, before we, shave off your Adam's apple, or potentially remove your breast, or turn your penis inside out, maybe we should discuss what some of the other potential factors are concerning this. So again, we're back to something where we're treating two very, very different things as if they fall under the same umbrella.
They do not. Not in my opinion. And that's, it's one of those things where when you're talking about conversion therapy and shit like that, I mean, it's archaic. It's, it's torture, and that's, obviously that is not something that is a reasonable human being that, you think should be happening. But you go back and you look at some of the, medical devices and things we used to do that we thought we knew better, I mean, we used to
Lobotomies.
fucking lobotomies or bloodletting, get the ghosts out of your blood, you know. We've grown, and we continue to grow, but you can't. But there have been times where we look back and go, well, this is all fucking wrong. We should have never done this. This is not the way that we should do it. And I think that there's going to be an aha moment in the future where people look back on us at this time and go, can you believe people were letting these people do this to these kids?
We're letting 12-year-old girls have their breasts removed.
Yeah. I don't see how anybody can look at it and go, oh, well, it's okay. It's not okay. It'll never be okay. And in time, history will show that we're idiots for allowing it to happen.
I don't think it's going to be too. So part of the issue that you've had with the trans surgery side of this whole thing is we don't really have any information, because to be trans and receive these surgeries and treatments in numbers is very, very new.
Right.
Right? A 4,000% increase in people that identify as trans since 2012.
Right.
And again, as we talked about earlier, I credit a lot of that to a social contagion.
Pretty popular.
But my point is we don't have a 15 or 20 year study.
Right.
And even that being the case, I encourage anybody to look up Chloe Cole. Chloe Cole is a detransitioner who is only like 22 or 23 years old at this point. And when this individual was 14, 15, began some of these applications and surgeries and hormone treatments. And, even within that short period of time, has realized that this was an incredible mistake.
Yeah.
You know how many mistakes I made when I was 12?
Right.
Can you imagine if one of them was to remove my penis?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Not for nothing, man. I'm 48 years old. Me and my wife are just now trying to have a baby.
Yep.
If you had asked me 8 years ago if I wanted a kid, I would have said absolutely not.
Yep.
If you had asked me 34 years ago, there isn't a chance that I would have, said that yes, and I probably would have been open to some type of successful intervention that would have destroyed that capacity at the time.
Yep. And it's awful short-sighted of these people and these parents to support that type of shit, because again, we didn't know what we wanted when we were kids. We didn't know what we were gonna do, what we were gonna be. I would argue that even until into my 20s, I was a clueless dipshit on most things,
30s.
Yeah,
maybe,
well,
but-
yeah, I was trying not to look that bad, but no, it's one of those things where it shouldn't be happening. And another thing, and I don't want to rant on it. We're getting short on time, but conversion therapy and medications and things like that for prisoners, people in prison. I don't think that taxpayers should be funding those types of things.
No.
I think that, there's a lot of people that go, well, why not? They're human beings. Yeah, well, they lost their freedoms. And one of their freedoms is being able to make choices like that. So, you take their choices away for fucking up. We should not, as taxpayers, we pay enough to keep them housed in these places. We shouldn't be paying for their surgeries and their shit just to send them into a women's prison to later find out that they went over there just to rape women, which is and I can't remember the specific case, but that happened recently.
Yeah.
In more than once, but there's a documented case recently where it happened, and the one of the people that argued, one of the women that argued for this to happen, to get this inmate transferred over to a female prison, and then she feels horrible. If she had to do it again, she'd never do it again. And I'd have to find sources to cite them for you, but it's something that we shouldn't be funding as taxpayers, and you should be an adult before you are even considered to make that choice. Parents have been arrested for tattooing their kids
Or letting them drink. Weird. So, tattooing is the better example because we're talking about a permanent application provided to a minor at a point in time where they are not able to make that decision.
Right. That's why you have to be 18 to get a tattoo.
Yeah.
In most states.
Yeah.
But it's to the point where, as an adult, you can make all the decisions you want, whether I agree with them or not. But as a kid, let these kids live their lives as kids, and don't fuck them up. I mean, they have a hard enough life as it is with everything going on, that we've even covered with the social media, the bullying, the last thing that they need is to be persuaded into making a choice that they're going to have to live with for the rest of their lives.
Zero argument.
I don't think people think things through when it comes to that, as far as the difference between you got to be 21 to buy beer or cigarettes. You got to be 18 to get a tattoo. You got to be 18 or 21 to get a gun. Because these are heavy responsibilities. They say, but you can
transition at 7.
Come on, there's got to be some common sense in here somewhere.
Yeah, it's funny. Sometimes it really comes down to like the eyeball test. You know what I'm saying? Like I've been in mixed martial arts gyms. I've been in weightlifting gyms. You can tell when somebody's on gear. You know what I mean? You can not for nothing, the ability for the human eye to discern what is fake, what is AI generated, what is special effects is amazing. Like sometimes the eyeball test is a very, very real thing. Yeah. And this is not exactly the eyeball test. It's more, it's from more of a moral standpoint or an opinion standpoint. But yeah, you're never going to sell it to me that men competing against women is okay.
Nope. I'll go to the grave with believing that. And I think if you have any type of morality at all, you would feel the same way. And I hate to generalize people, that are caught up in this whole popularity of it thing. But I mean, if you really stop to think about it, or if you've raised two daughters in the sports world, it hits home a little harder for me. Had I not had kids in sports, who knows, maybe I wouldn't have been as opinionated about it.
Sure.
Because I wouldn't have had the experience. But I can see all the trials and tribulations that my kids went through to just get to where they're at. I couldn't imagine somebody stepping in and taking that away from them because they felt that they felt the way they did, I guess, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, well, about good. Looks like we're
I think we got a good
about out
episode
of
there.
time. Yeah, I really, it's nice to have you on this side of the camera.
Yeah. It's nice to be on this side of the camera once in a while and not drinking nasty shots.
And yeah, I was just gonna say, all right, go plug your cast.
All right, check us out. We've got a podcast where we drink beers. Sometimes we do some nasty shots. It's all for fun. We review them. It's called Don't Knock It Till You Buy It. It's on YouTube. Check us out. You'll like it.
Good shit, man.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, brother.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, yep,
Great conversation.
absolutely.
We should do this again.
Yeah, we'll do this again next time I can't get a guest. No,
Yeah.
I'm fucking with you.
Hey, we can call Derek.
Oh, are we that desperate? No,
Not yet.
I'm kidding. Cool.
Awesome, man.
Oh, that time, 41 seconds left.